193.
between Lafayette and Kensington.
I don't understand what you said about the Tag River being under you.
Oh, the Tag Railroad. Well, the Tag Railroad, when it came to Pigeon Mountain was in the way. So they dug a tunnel all the way under the mountain to go on, to get over to the Lafayette side. And it's a part of the wildlife management area now, so it's something that you can go visit. They put earth berms in it to start with years ago because it was private property and dammed it up so there's water about that deep sometimes in the entrance. But the rest of the time when it's dry weather and you don't mind kicking a snake out of the way, you can just go back there and walk through the tunnel. We call it Iron Horse Cave. Anyway, I'm interrupting. Les.
How long did it take to build that tunnel through there?
2 years.
2 years.
And it took them 2 years of digging at Pigeon Mountain to get through the tunnels down there to do 7 tons because it was the more through shale than it was through solid rock.
Most of my interest lies in, as far as mining goes, in the methods that the miners used. The way that they got whatever mineral it was that they were searching for out of the ground. And a lot of the methods are the same between coal, iron ore, gold. It's a lot of it is the same techniques that they use. What I've got up here is just a little display with some of the lighting that they used and a few of the tools. This was, a lot of people call them a teapot light, but they're just an oil wick lamp. Had a wick in it just like any other hurricane lamps and that kind of stuff. But they burned a solid fuel that was like almost paraffin based. And there's a copper spout that actually goes all the way down to the bottom, and once you get it lit, it heats up and melts the fuel to soak up the wick, and that's what they used. Well, prior to these, it was just a candle. This was a pretty modern thing, and about 1890 was when these really took off. And these were the standard mine light until about 1903. And in about 1903 was when carbide lamps took off, which is what these are.
What kind of fuel did
This was, they actually called it sunshine fuel, but it was a paraffin-based fuel that it was almost a gel, really. It was thick. It wasn't something you just poured in, because these things, you would just pour it out. I mean, you'll lay it on your side. You'll see in some of the pictures here, the mines at Pigeon Mountain especially were not very big. I mean, most of these guys were working in a hole that they could just crawl into. It was not something that you just walked into and had all the room in the world. So that fuel that they used in these was a paraffin-based fuel that wouldn't just turn up and pour out as you laid on your side of the water.
You said it was a oil-based?
Paraffin-based, yes, sir.
They'll also burn lard in a pinch.
Right. And they would burn kerosene too. You can put regular lamp oil in that and it'll burn, but it's going to dump out and get everywhere.
And that was it? That's all you had to
That was
handle?
it. That was it right there. And it would fit on a hat. Got a hook on it.
Oh, okay.
You wore on your hat. And that, like I said, was to about 1903 or so. Once the carbide lamp came into vogue, when they could make carbide cheap enough to use, these became the normal mine light. And calcium carbide is the fuel for it. And the stuff actually just looks like a rock.
Calcium, yeah.
You know, that's a hunk of calcium carbide, and it produces acetylene gas once it's mixed with water. So the way these lamps work is there's 2 chambers. The bottom is where you put the carbide, the top is where you put the water, and there's an adjustable water drip. It drips just a little bit of water on it, and it produces the gas that comes out the burner tip here, and I'll fire this one up here in just a second. But these were in full use by about 1910, 1912 or so. Pretty much every mine anywhere in the country, this is what they were using.
It
There were
didn't
still
hurt
a
them
few.
to breathe it?
I'm sorry?
Didn't hurt them to breathe it?
Not this. This, once the gas burns, there's really not anything that you're breathing. It's just like having an oil rig lamp burning in your house or something like that.
How long would one of those last?
You can get a couple of hours out of a charge on one like this. Now, they made lamps that were bigger, that were hand lamps, that you could get a full shift out of. As a matter of fact, they call them shift lamps. And they carried the carbide in specially made containers, the companies that made the carbide lamps. These two are Guy's Dropper carbide lamps. This one's an Auto Light. There was another company called Just Right, and this is a Just Right brand carbide container. And that's way more than enough for a complete shift. That's a couple of days worth of carbide, really. Most of them carry just a smaller amount. That's also a Just Right carbide container made to fit in the hip pocket. And but the vast majority of the mining that was done in this area, southern Tennessee, northeast Alabama, northwest Georgia, the miners were fairly poor, and stuff like this was kind of an expensive commodity that they didn't necessarily have to have, because they all had an empty Prince Albert can laying around that they could put the carbide in.
Yeah, I imagine that would be.
That is what the vast majority of miners carried the carbide in, was the Prince Albert can.
You find those restaurants in the caves all over the place.
It would, I mean, probably, those little pebbles probably cost some money. I mean,
Well,
rocks.
I don't know what carbide cost at that time. It was normally ordered in 50-pound drums and was available at the company store. And of course, was there a company store at Estelle? I know it wasn't here. The company store had all the needed supplies for the miners.
The miner had to provide their own lights.
It's powder, lamp, fuses, everything the miner had to provide for himself. And even his tools. You know, there was, that pick right there was something that you bought at the company store, and you paid the company blacksmith so much a week for tool sharpening services. This one's worn down awfully bad. This one is just about used up. These things, when they were new, the points on them were about this long. But that's what you had to hack out your living with, and then get paid by the ton. Which is what started a lot of the union, or the unionization of the mines in this area. Now, that didn't ever happen at Estelle. Estelle pretty much ceased all operations before that really became too much of an issue, before unions really took hold in the area. Now, you want to get into the late 20s and early 30s coal mining history from up in Saudi and that area, that there was a lot of union stuff there. That's kind of a whole different presentation than what we're doing here tonight.
He's gonna get that lit here in just a minute and show you how the whole thing operates. Carbide lights, you wouldn't think how bright they are, but when your eyes are adjusted in the dark, they're so bright that you can't hardly look at them.
Like calcium mix.
The mining seats.
They hauled the last bit of ore out of the mines down here in 1922. And the reason for that is they had started developing these huge iron ore beds in Minnesota and the upper peninsula of Michigan that were so cheap to mine that it became just a non-profitable thing down here. The first iron ore mining that we can document was as soon as the last Cherokee moved out, the speculators for the land and the prospectors moved into this area here. They prospected for manganese, limonite, and iron ore here in Catoosa County. There's actually some deposits. There's a mine on the very point of Taylor's Ridge above Ringo, and there's some limonite mines in that same ridge that Rocky Face Ridge comes up.
Y'all had calcium rock around here? Y'all had calcium rock around here?
Yeah, the limestone was in the layers above that and below it.
Oh, okay.
In fact, if you dig deep enough, you get down into the Knox dolomite here, which is the precursor to marble. Everywhere it was subducted like it did down at Tate, Georgia, that was cooked into marble.
This is, like I said, got water in the top, carbide in the bottom. One of the issues with carbide lamps is they are finicky little things. Sometimes they,
Is there a piece of flint in it?
there it is. There we go. They are finicky little suckers that sometimes they work great for you and sometimes you will cuss them.
And it's like wearing a potentially violent chemistry experiment on
There's
your
going to be a
head.
pop. That was your light in the mine. Is there any way to turn off the lights there?
Oh, it is bright enough. Turn it on, turn it off.
Owen needs one of those. You don't have to hold your finger in the button.
Oh, really bright.
That was all the light that you had to work in the little tunnels with. And it was fairly bright. It's a lot brighter than what the oil wick lamp puts off.
Was that always like, have more light than a candle?
Yes, it did have more light than a candle just simply because it put off a larger flame. The oil wick lamp here, when you were walking around with it, you had a flame about 6 to 8 inches high, shooting above your head there. And there wasn't a real good way to regulate that. This, you can have a whole lot of water mixing and have a big flame, or you can cut it down to just have next to nothing. And all the miners had a cloth hat that the carbide lamp would fit on. There's several different bracket systems that the different manufacturers would use, but they were all, basically the same, and just having to have something where you could keep your hands free to work that would provide you enough light to see by, that was relatively safe.
About how many men worked in the mine here?
Doug, how many were?
There was between 140 and 170 during the peak periods at
Yeah,
Estelle.
but I mean, just in one night, like you said.
I wished I could tell you, but it would be just a half a dozen or less.
Yeah, it would totally depend on the mine. Now, some of them that we've got pictures of over here, I promise there was probably 3 guys working in that shaft there, no more than that.
They have to be
They're
good
just-
friends with those pigs and girls.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, absolutely. And also, the mines at Estelle, Doug's got some other stuff over here. One of the things he's got is a blasting cap box when they would set the powder charges, but the mine that we've got some pictures of the inside of was actually just dug out with a pick and shovel. There was no blasting done there at all. It's not, and you will actually be able to see in the pictures there, the rock strata it's very loose. You can walk up with your hand there in this layer where the iron ore is and just pull chunks out of it with your hand. So there was really no need to blast. That's about right. There it is. If you want to start your picture.
This is the train tunnel for the tag railroad that goes through Pigeon Mountain. Let's see, get over here.
Goes through the White Mountain?
That was the tag railroad tunnel through Pigeon Mountain, which is right at Estelle. The Dinky Railroad ran through some tunnels that were much smaller. They're probably 10 feet tall inside and maybe 15 feet wide. That's for the really wide ones. Like I said, the engine that they were pushing this train with was about the size of a Chevrolet Suburban, and they were trying to do things cheaply so they didn't overbuild their tunnels. There's an account of where there was a slab coming, so we'll get to that picture. And they were pushing the train through, and all the miners were riding on it, and they tried to signal them to stop, and they had hit that slab doing a pretty good clip going through it. It derailed the cars, killed one miner, and then they had to amputate the leg of another one and sent the rest of them all to the infirmary. You can see the light at the end of the tunnel right there. That's the far side of it, right in the center. one of the tunnels that has completely collapsed. You can come into it from the other end, but you can't get out. There is the other end. So you can see how much the ground is eroded right there, because that was used to be a straight cut through there, and it's got talus slopes that touch it. This was the railroad bed, and that's where the Estelle Mine Trail, the horse trail and mountain bike trail follows that path all the way through there for, I think it's for 6 miles. This is at the north end of the Dinky line. This was part of the Crusher outfit. I'm not sure that Les has been there yet.
I don't know, that's one of the ordinances,
Or been. The Crusher was right in that area. There's all sorts of trestles and places where they had triples. The woods are just full of this stuff.
This is all at Pigeon Mountain.
Yes. That's the ore bin from the top. Now, this is recommended as a wintertime trip. Don't go up there in the summertime. It's a little bit thick and a little bit snaky there.
Is that a foundation?
It is. And they must have made their concrete homemade there, because it's full of the local creek gravel, and the concrete's not of a real good quality, so they may have been slaking their own lime down there from the limestone. This is the view through one of the railroad tunnels. See the red rock at the very bottom of the picture in the walls? That was the upper vein of the iron ore right here that they were following. And they killed 2 birds with 1 stone. They got the ore out and made the train tunnel. They also used to their advantage the limestone layer that was slightly above that, called the Fort Fink Formation. And that made the stable roof of the tunnel, wherever the walls were, they was made out of loose shake. More mystery foundations in the woods. That's where some of the ceiling is flaked away. That's one of the slabs that broke out. Might have been the one that derailed the train in 1907. That's the beginning of that. Be patient with me just for a second. And we're going to swap this out. See you light there, Les. Yeah. You just have to stop the light. This one's very short. This is a new thing with me, so be patient. We haven't got a chance to get all these pictures put onto one disc here yet. I guess that means it's thinking about it. what you're doing. Yes, see what you do. Come on, let's do that. Yeah, that's what gets it good. Yes. Get pulled up and finish the start.
There we go. Good. Next. Okay. This is something really, really cool from the inside of one of the iron ore mines at Pigeon. It is a salamander and her eggs. And that actually was in a hole about that big around that we just happened to notice. And that's something that's just very, very rare to see that was worth taking some pictures of. So these old mines have taken on a cave-like appearance inside. They actually have little, formations in them with stalactites and stalagmites and that sort of thing, and wildlife that are living in them now that are calling that home. That is the outside of the boiler from the steam donkey that was in the pocket there. The picture that's going around. This picture here, that is this part here with the part that's at the top with the leaves laying on it was the door for the firebox. And that's just the sheet metal from the outside of the boiler, but it's actually, that's probably what, a half a mile, Doug, from where it was actually set up at. It was discarded and washed down and was covered up with silt at some point, and one of the floods uncovered it, and we found it, or Doug found it.
In 2007, it had been buried there 100 years in the mine tails. In 2007, it came a giant flood at Pigeon Mountain and uncovered that and a whole bunch of other neat stuff.
This is the foundation where that donkey engine was set up at. It's kind of hard to see in, but there's about 8 large bolts that are about 1 inch or so in diameter sticking up out of the top of it that it was